Simcha, celebration, Simcha, Simcha, celebration of life.
Hi from me, Jared Epstein, and welcome to another episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. The seaside suburb of Muizenberg in Cape Town was once home to around 800 Jewish families. Although the community is now small in numbers, they aren't small in spirit. Rabbi Ryan Newfield was recently appointed their first full-time rabbi in over 2 decades. He tells us more about the significance of this.
I was asked to come to Muizenberg as a community builder to help build a community which became very small from a place of greatness, which they used to call Muizenberg. I was living in Bogota, Colombia for the last 2 years. Previously, before that, I'd been living in the United States for 15 years, coming from Johannesburg. And I always wanted to spend more time in South Africa, particularly to be closer to my family. The first time I came here, it was probably 1990. It was a very different looking Muizenberg. I did come to synagogue then because I was already very interested in Judaism. I think I was 10 years old. The next time I came was probably 15 years later when I visited Muizenberg on and off when I would come back to South Africa and visit some friends in Cape Town. And it was already, I don't want to say decreasing in terms of its spirit, but it was decreasing in terms of its number. And I decided that I don't believe it's the end of this community. I think that there are enough people of the core who love this community and wanted to continue. And this is, I believe, the most southern synagogue in Africa. So if you think about it, it's quite a prestigious, it sounds prestigious at least, but I think that the majority of Jews are not part of any particular Jewish community at the moment. And I don't think that all of it is intentional. I think that a lot of it was coming to places that they want to live in nature, but they couldn't get that by being close to the Jewish community, so they thought. And the president of the shul told me, we're working off a white canvas. We can create whatever it is because there needs to be some type of new painting in the southern suburbs to bring people back or bring people in for the first time because it hasn't happened for the last 20 years. So I think that was also a very nice way of saying to me, Ryan, express yourself in the way that you think needs to happen for yourself to be happy, as well as for the community to be happy, because we're all trying to create something new. And that's nice to be a part of something which you can be creative with. What I and my wife bring to the table is a more focused direction in how do you make Judaism relevant and interesting and exciting. In these parts of the world, with the Jewish people in the southern suburbs, I think I need to be willing, and I am willing, to be a friend of people, because that's really what I want to be as a rabbi and as a community builder. The vision of having a rabbi in Muizenberg is to invigorate the sleeping Jews in Bishop and Noordhoek and all these other beautiful places that they live. So, in terms of community building and building a community, I think that you need the common denominator of care and consideration and effort. And I think if you have those things, people will come back to be a part of a community, because who doesn't want to be a part of something positive? Especially when you're meeting cool people and you're maybe doing some cool things to help out the world. So that's kind of my focus in what I'm trying to do. But there's a Yiddish expression, man plans and God laughs. I think that from my perspective, what I wanted to hear is, what are people looking for before I start making any plans, just to understand who the people are that I'm dealing with. Are we talking about very progressive people? Are we talking about very conservative people? Are we talking about very traditional people? What I realized very quickly is that there's the whole spectrum of individuals and families in the southern suburbs. So in terms of the actual synagogue, the plan was to make it more relevant and vibrant. How do you do that? Well, I want to bring in as many people from both in the community and outside the community to contribute. Whether that means having different speakers, or whether that means, empowering other people to get involved in various aspects of either the service or post-service, meaning after the service at the meals that we eat together. Those are things that I was looking at in terms of the services. But the services is only one aspect of community building. The other aspect, and I think this is probably as important, if not more important, for the community in Muizenberg, is general outreach and getting people together for shared experiences. And those could be things like retreats, they could be things like courses, they could be things like family weekends, either at the synagogue or away. Those are some of the initiatives that I'd like to embark upon when the world allows us to do. The synagogue is, I believe, founded in the year 1924. So everybody is hoping for that 100th century grand party in 2024. And that will be a testament to the local community. I think that I definitely commend all the people who have kept it going. I'll give a special mention to, Farrell Struhl, who is my close friend, who's been the president of the shul for a long time. But I know that since he was, I think, 18 or 20 years old, he literally came here almost every weekend for 20 years and helped out this community and kept it going. So he was the young life that brought me out here and kept it going. But he's not the only one that I should commend. I mean, there are so many people, all the people who grew up here, as well as whoever's here. It might be small, but everybody comes pretty religiously, so to speak, in the sense of, there are the same people coming every week in and out. I'll give total kudos, like total credit to all the people who have kept this place going for so long. And I hope to create and meet all the people who are here from all shapes and walks of life, because that is what the Southern Suburbs is. And I do feel that if you create enough programs and you make enough effort, people will resonate with the love that's going around.
The Nachman Goldman Fellowship is a leadership program aimed at Jewish adults around the world. We chat to Associate Director David Jacobson, who tells us who Nachman Goldman was and what the fellowship in his name is really all about.
The mission and the vision of the Nachman Goldman Fellowship is to bring a diverse group of young Jewish leaders from around the world, to allow them to live together, to learn together, to be together, in order to engender an increased sense of empathy and mutual self-respect, all under the aegis of serious Jewish scholarship. Dr. Nachman Goldman was the founder of many organizations. He founded the World Jewish Congress and was its president for many, many years. He founded the World Zionist Organization and was the president for many, many years. He founded the Conference of Major American Jewish Organizations. He was the architect behind Beit HaTfutzot, the Diaspora Museum, which was originally known as the Nachman Goldman Museum. Dr. Nachman Goldman's concern was the Jewish world and primarily Jewish culture. He was also the architect behind the Claims Conference, the conference where he met the German government to gain reparations for survivors from the Holocaust. And within that, he realized in 1965 that not only had lives been destroyed by the Holocaust, but Jewish culture had been decimated. So he made an arrangement with the German government where some of the funds would be directed into a foundation called the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture, whose initial aim in 1965 was to regenerate Jewish culture in the diaspora, primarily by offering grants and scholarships and postdoctoral scholarships and encouraging the growth of Jewish scholarship, which it's done for over 50 years since that date. But Nachman Goldman saw another issue then creeping into the Jewish world. The issue of the divisions, the cracks, what he called the centrifugal forces, the forces that were beginning to break up the Jewish unity that had been there in the post-Holocaust era. So in 1987, in his name, the Mora Foundation launched the Nachman Goldman Fellowship with a really, I suppose, a lofty yet a modest aim, because it had no specific agenda other than to try and engender a sense of connectedness, of peoplehood, a sense of interconnectedness among young and emerging Jewish leaders from around the globe. The Nachman Goldman Fellowship is a truly global program in its inception, and we pride ourselves on making space for the smaller Jewish communities. It's often difficult because the language of instruction is primarily in English, which makes it difficult, and the level is high level, so sometimes people struggle with the language, but we will allow that. We will try and be as gentle as possible in allowing as many Jews from as many geographical locations to participate. The Nachman Goldman Fellowship has a very particular educational trajectory. We divide our days into primarily three things. There's always going to be a very top-level academic presentation of some sort in the morning from amazing faculty from Columbia University, from the top universities in Israel, and amazing Jewish scholars who come to talk to the theme from a meta perspective. So that's the one area. There'll always be some of that in the program. The next thing in the program, there will be what we call discussion groups. In other words, opportunities to interact with your peers in smaller groups. And that's often programized. There might be an activity involved in that, or it might be an opportunity to share some questions and reflections. Lots of that time, interpersonal discussions in groups. And then there's peer-led activities. It's also an opportunity for people to lead presentations, to run workshops, to gather together to show any skills they have with their peers. So that's the educational trajectory which runs throughout the day. It's pretty intensive. But the primary power of the Nachman Goldman Fellowship, without doubt, is in the creation of a sacred space of acceptance by the cohort. When I went to my first fellowship, I had no idea of the range of opinion and diversity and of interest within the Jewish community and globally. I had no idea. And it was incredibly rewarding. And you were able to meet Jews from parts of the world I would never have dreamed it was possible. I mean, who thinks you can meet a Jew from Cuba? I mean, who would have any insight into what's going on in these tiny communities of Eastern Europe? You meet a Jew from Poland who's restarting that Jewish community from nothing. These are things in South Africa we take for granted. So on the one hand, you get exposed to big America and big Israel and this big thinking. On the other hand, you see these small Jewish communities doing remarkable things. And when you see an Orthodox Jew from South Africa who has a very strong opinion about Reform Jews, they're entitled to that opinion. But when all of a sudden this Orthodox Jew from South Africa is confronted with a female Reform convert doing work in Poland in the most dire circumstances to re-energize that whole Jewish community, what can they say? Something magical happens. You come there with whatever perspective, and it can be politically left, politically right, religiously affirm, religiously secular, and your opinions on gender can be different, and LGBTQI can be different. There's massive diversity, but something in that space says, that's okay. That's okay. I don't want to change you. I want to learn with you. And in the process of learning with you, I gain a mutual sense of empathy and respect, which I take with me when I leave the fellowship that I promised you. And we use this term too glibly. It's life-altering in the sense that you can never regain that closed perspective. Once you gain empathy with a human being, you can't take empathy back. You feel it. It's there. It follows you when you return to the fellowship in your work, and that is the real magic of the fellowship. There's a question asked at the Nachman Goldman Fellowship that always intrigued me as a fellow and still intrigues me now, that I don't believe is asked enough. In the majority of Jewish programs, when we look at the issues facing the world, the big issues, the issues of Israel, diaspora, and Zionism, and streams of Judaism, and anti-Semitism, they are big issues, nationalism, rampant nationalism facing us. We always tend to look at it from the what's going on. Nachman Goldman Fellowship asks the question, why? Why is it important to be Jewish? Not just the what's of being Jewish and the hows. The question of why is so deeply, profoundly powerful. Once you start thinking about why you're being Jewish and the kind of information you've been fed, it just fills your brain and it fills your soul to be able to go back to the South African Jewish community with renewed vigor, renewed energy, renewed passion. I used to say it's a recharge for the batteries. I would encourage any South African between the ages of 25 and 40 who has an interest in this kind of program to seriously consider it. It really is an incredible program. You can speak to them, many alumni in South Africa. We have some 80 odd alumni around the country. You can find them. I can assure you they're in Johannesburg, they're in Durban, they're in Cape Town, wherever you are, there's an NGF alum somewhere, go speak to them. They are the best people to tell you really about the program. Speak to somebody who's been there.
Chief Rabbi Warren Goldstein continues sharing the ancient wisdom of Jewish sages and how this applies to modern-day ethics. Today, he considers why friendship is so important that even the Talmud tells us so.
What are friends for? It's an interesting question because we all have friends, but what are they for? And is it important to have friends in the first place? And you wouldn't think that you would get advice on friendship from the great sages of the Talmud. But the wisdom of the Talmud, the wisdom of the Torah which God has given us, is something which touches every dimension of life. And it says in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of the Fathers, Kaneh lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend. So what does that mean, a friend? And why acquire? How do we understand that? Why do we need friends? Maybe it's just a part of life, but why would the sages of the Talmud say, find yourself a friend, acquire for yourself a friend? What is so important about a friend? And what the commentators explain is that friendship is not only about the sense of doing fun things together, but friendship is about providing emotional support, and we all need emotional support. That helps us to be better people, stronger people. We need to receive that friendship and give that friendship. Give people encouragement. Encouraging the people around us is such an important mitzvah because as human beings, everything depends on morale and our sense of motivation. And we can give that to others by being encouraging of the good things that they do. Being a good friend to a person is giving them that kind of encouragement. But it's not only about emotional encouragement. It is also about finding someone to do good things with in the world. The commentators explain that friends are there to do mitzvahs with. Because when we do mitzvahs, when we do good deeds with those around us, it becomes so much more effective than when we do it on our own. We multiply the effects of our actions, but also we are able to collaborate and to do it better. And when we come together to do good deeds, the multiplier effect of that is so powerful in making this world into a better place. But there's another role for a friend, and that is also what our commentators explain. They say that friendship is about getting objective, outside advice and input. See, there are two dimensions to this. The one is advice, and advice is so important in life. We need to be able to turn to people for advice. In fact, King Solomon says in the book of Proverbs, you will rise through many advisors because, it's so difficult in life to work out what to do. Life is complicated. Situations are complex. There are many different variables. And we are so subjective about ourselves and the situation. Sometimes we just need a fresh pair of eyes. So we should turn to people and have the humility to listen to the guidance and the advice of other people, the humility that Moses, our teacher, had. Moses in the desert, when he was leading the people, his father-in-law, Yitro, came and saw that he was working so hard and that he was trying to judge all of the cases of the people. And he gave Moses advice. He said, set up a system of judges. And Moses was the greatest leader of Jewish history. And yet he had the humility to listen to that advice. And he turned to God, and God gave him the instruction to follow the advice and set up an entire system of judges so that everyone would be able to have their cases heard. and that Moses would be able to lead the people with the capacity that he needed. But he needed humility to listen to the advice. And we needed humility to listen to the advice of our friends and to turn to people for advice. But also the humility to hear criticism. And this is a very interesting function and purpose of friendship. The commentators explain that when it comes to friends, one of the most important tasks of a truly good friend is to tell us when we're going wrong. And that kind of criticism has to come from a friend. It has to come from someone who loves us. Because if criticism doesn't come from a place of love and care and concern about us, then it is destructive and it breaks down self-esteem. But when someone whom we trust and whom we love and whom we treasure says to us, you know what, you actually made a mistake. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have said that. That was wrong. You said something hurtful. We need to listen to that. It's uncomfortable. Of course it's uncomfortable because it's so hard for us to see our own mistakes. And the immediate reaction when we get criticized is to defend ourselves and say, no, I didn't do anything wrong. Defend, rationalize. But that's not how we grow. We grow through humility. We grow through listening to what other people have to teach us. We grow when our friends show us where we're going wrong. That is what true friendship is about. It's about all of these different dimensions. And that's why our sages say, acquire for yourself a friend. But they use the language acquire because to find true friends, to connect with true friends requires effort. It's not just going to come. It can't just say, have a friend, make a friend. It's more than that. It's acquire. We have to give. We have to pay for it. Not money, of course, but we have to give of ourselves. We have to invest of ourselves in the friendship. And you know what the commentators explain? The way that we invest in relationships is when we are prepared to set aside our own ego and we'll be able to transcend our own self-interest and say we are there to make a difference to others, to forgive, to be able to see beyond faults, to be able to forgive hurt. That is the kind of investment that is so important when it comes to all relationships. And we need to be committed to that because friendship is such an important part, not only of receiving the emotional support that we need, and not only in terms of advice, but in terms of growing and becoming better people and being able to flourish and truly realize our incredible potential.
That brings us to the end of this week's episode of Simcha, a celebration of life. As always, we'd love to hear from you, so please send us a Facebook message at Spirit Sister Productions. From me, Jared Epstein, and the Simcha team, remember, a real friend is one who walks in when the rest of the world walks out.